The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble courtyard of the Royal Embassy in London. Colonel Marcus Richardson adjusted his crisp military uniform one final time before stepping out of his black diplomatic car. As the newly appointed military attaché from the United States, he carried himself with the confidence that came from 30 years of service and countless diplomatic missions around the world. Richardson had served in embassies from Tokyo to Berlin, from Cairo to Moscow. He understood protocol, respected tradition, and knew how to navigate the delicate world of international diplomacy. But today felt different. Today, he was about to represent American military interests at one of the most prestigious royal institutions in the world. The Royal Embassy stood like a fortress of tradition, its ancient stones holding centuries of history within their walls. Guards in their iconic red uniforms and tall black hats stood motionless at their posts, their faces hidden beneath the shadow of their ceremonial headgear. To most visitors, these guards appeared to be living statues, decorative elements of royal pageantry. Richardson approached the main entrance with measured steps. His polished boots clicked against the stone pathway as he reviewed the morning's agenda in his mind. He was scheduled to meet with the Royal Military Secretary about joint training exercises between American and British Special Forces. It was an important meeting that could shape military cooperation for years to come. As he neared the entrance, Richardson noticed one particular guard standing at attention near the massive oak doors. The guard appeared young, perhaps in his early 20s, with the same stoic expression that all royal guards were trained to maintain. His red tunic was immaculate, his white gloves spotless, and his rifle held in perfect position. Richardson had always been impressed by the discipline of royal guards. During his previous visits to various royal locations, he had witnessed their unwavering commitment to duty. He had seen tourists try to make them laugh, photographers attempt to distract them, and even children run circles around them. Through it all, the guards remained as still as statues, their eyes fixed straight ahead, their faces expressionless. But something about this particular guard caught Richardson's attention. Maybe it was the way he held his shoulders, or perhaps the slight tension in his jaw that only someone with military experience would notice. Richardson had spent decades reading people, sizing up soldiers, and identifying potential in young recruits. This guard had something different about him. As Richardson approached the entrance, he made a decision that would change everything. Drawing on his years of military tradition and diplomatic experience, he decided to acknowledge the guard's service with a formal military salute. It was a gesture of respect, one soldier to another, regardless of nationality or rank. Richardson stopped 3 feet in front of the guard and brought his hand up in a crisp American military salute. He held the position for the appropriate duration, his eyes meeting the guard's gaze with professional respect. It was the same salute he had given to countless soldiers throughout his career, from fresh recruits to decorated generals. But what happened next defied every expectation Richardson had built over 3 decades of military service. The young guard's eyes flickered with something that looked like surprise, then recognition, then something else entirely. Instead of maintaining his stoic composure or simply acknowledging the salute with a slight nod as most royal guards would do, the guard did something unprecedented. The guard broke from his rigid position and returned Richardson's salute with perfect military precision. But this was no ordinary Royal Guard salute. This was something different, something that made Richardson's blood run cold and his mind race with questions. The guard's salute was executed with a level of precision and authority that Richardson had only seen in the most elite military units. The movement was fluid yet sharp, respectful yet commanding. But most importantly, it was executed in a style that Richardson immediately recognized. It was an American military salute, not just any American military salute, but one performed with the exact technique and timing that could only come from years of intensive training in the United States Armed Forces. The angle of the hand, the position of the elbow, the duration of the hold. Everything was textbook American military protocol. Richardson felt his heart skip a beat as he processed what he was seeing. Royal Guards were trained in British military traditions, not American ones. Their salutes, when given at all, followed centuries-old British customs and protocols. What he was witnessing should have been impossible. The guard held the salute for exactly the right duration, then brought his hand down with the same crisp precision. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Richardson saw something that chilled him to the bone. Recognition. The guard knew exactly who Richardson was. As Richardson lowered his own salute, his mind began racing through possibilities. Who was this young man? How did he know American military protocol so perfectly? And most importantly, why was someone with obvious American military training standing guard at the Royal Embassy in London? The guard returned to his position of attention, his face once again becoming the emotionless mask that royal protocol demanded. But Richardson had seen behind that mask for just a moment, and what he had glimpsed there changed everything. Richardson stood there for several seconds, studying the guard's face, looking for any clue that might explain what had just happened. The guard's features were sharp and angular, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to hold depths of experience that didn't match his apparent age. There were small scars on his hands that Richardson hadn't noticed before, the kind that came from extensive combat training. Slowly, Richardson began to piece together details that he had initially overlooked. The guard's posture wasn't just disciplined. It was the kind of perfect stance that came from elite military training. His breathing was controlled and measured, like someone trained in high-stress situations. Even the way he held his rifle suggested familiarity with weapons that went far beyond ceremonial duties. Richardson realized that he was looking at someone who was much more than he appeared to be. This wasn't just a royal guard performing ceremonial duties. This was a soldier, a highly trained soldier, who was hiding in plain sight behind the pageantry of royal tradition. The implications began to dawn on Richardson as he stood there in the morning sunlight. If this guard was indeed American military, what was he doing here? Was this some kind of joint security operation that Richardson hadn't been briefed on? Or was there something more sinister at play? Richardson's diplomatic training kicked in, and he forced himself to appear calm and composed despite the turmoil in his mind. He couldn't afford to draw attention to what had just happened, not until he understood the full situation. But he also couldn't ignore what he had witnessed. As he finally moved toward the embassy entrance, Richardson made a mental note of every detail about the guard. The name tag on his uniform read Thompson, but Richardson suspected that might not be his real name. He memorized the guard's physical characteristics, his mannerisms, and most importantly, the exact way he had performed that salute. Richardson had been in the intelligence business long enough to know that chance encounters like this were rarely coincidental. Someone had wanted him to see that salute, to recognize the American military training. But why? And what was he supposed to do with that information? As he reached for the embassy door handle, Richardson heard a soft sound behind him. He turned slightly and saw that Guard Thompson had shifted his position almost imperceptibly. It was a movement so slight that most people would never have noticed it, but to Richardson's trained eye, it was clearly deliberate. The guard was watching him. Richardson entered the embassy with his mind spinning. He had come here for a routine diplomatic meeting, but he was leaving with far more questions than answers. As he walked through the ornate hallways toward his appointment, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just stumbled into something much bigger than a simple breach of protocol. The meeting with the Royal Military Secretary proceeded normally, with discussions about training exercises and joint operations. But throughout the entire session, Richardson found his mind wandering back to the guard outside. He found himself analyzing every word the secretary said, looking for any hint that might explain what he had witnessed. When the meeting concluded, Richardson made an excuse about needing fresh air and stepped back outside into the courtyard. He told himself he was being paranoid, that there was probably a simple explanation for what had happened. But as his eyes found Guard Thompson still standing at his post, Richardson knew that his instincts were telling him otherwise. The guard stood with the same perfect posture, the same emotionless expression. To any casual observer, nothing had changed. But Richardson could sense the difference. There was an awareness in the guard's stance, a readiness that suggested he was prepared for whatever might come next. Richardson walked slowly back toward his car, his mind working through the implications of what he had discovered. He had been in the military long enough to know that when something didn't make sense, it usually meant there was crucial information he was missing. As he reached his vehicle, Richardson made a decision. He was going to find out who Guard Thompson really was, and why an American-trained soldier was standing guard at the Royal Embassy in London. He had contacts in military intelligence, favors he could call in, and resources at his disposal. What Richardson didn't know was that his investigation would uncover a web of secrets that reached into the highest levels of both American and British intelligence. He had no idea that Guard Thompson was not just any soldier, but someone whose true identity would shake the foundations of everything Richardson thought he knew about international security. As Richardson drove away from the embassy, he glanced back one final time at the figure of Guard Thompson, standing motionless at his post. The morning sun had shifted, casting the guard's face in shadow, but Richardson could still feel those piercing blue eyes watching him go. In that moment, Richardson realized that his life had just taken a dramatic turn. He had come to London for a routine assignment, but he was about to embark on a journey that would test everything he believed about loyalty, duty, and the true nature of international espionage. The game had begun, and Richardson had no idea just how high the stakes really were. Colonel Richardson couldn't concentrate on anything for the rest of that day. Back in his temporary quarters at the American Embassy, he sat at his desk, staring at a blank computer screen, his mind replaying every detail of the morning's encounter. The way Guard Thompson had executed that perfect American military salute haunted him like a puzzle with missing pieces. Richardson had built his career on reading people and situations. During his time in military intelligence, he had learned to trust his instincts above everything else. Those same instincts were now screaming that he had stumbled onto something significant, something that could have serious implications for national security. He picked up his secure phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in over 2 years. The line connected after several rings, and a familiar gravelly voice answered. "Henderson here." "Jack, it's Marcus Richardson. I need a favor." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Jack Henderson ran a small but highly effective intelligence operation that specialized in background checks on foreign nationals and security clearances. He and Richardson had worked together on several classified operations over the years, and Richardson trusted him completely. "Marcus, good to hear from you. What's the situation?" Richardson chose his words carefully, even on a secure line. "I need you to run a background check on someone. Royal Guard at the London Embassy, goes by the name Thompson. I need to know everything about him, especially any American military connections." "That's an interesting request. Any particular reason you're interested in a ceremonial guard?" Richardson hesitated for a moment, then decided to trust his old friend with the truth. "Jack, I witnessed something today that doesn't add up. This guard performed a textbook American military salute with precision that suggests extensive training. Royal Guards don't learn that kind of technique." Henderson was quiet for several seconds before responding. "I'll see what I can dig up. Give me 24 hours. After ending the call, Richardson spent the evening researching Royal Guard protocols and training procedures. He read through official documents, training manuals, and historical accounts of the Guard units. Everything he found confirmed his suspicions. Royal Guards were trained exclusively in British military traditions. American saluting techniques were never part of their curriculum. The next morning, Richardson found himself walking past the Royal Embassy again, this time taking a different route to make his surveillance less obvious. Guard Thompson was at his post, standing with the same perfect posture as the day before. Richardson observed him from a distance, noting details he had missed during their initial encounter. Thompson's physical conditioning was remarkable, even for a royal guard. His shoulders and arms showed the kind of muscle definition that came from intensive physical training, the type used by special forces units. His eyes moved in subtle patterns that suggested tactical awareness training. He was constantly scanning his environment while maintaining his ceremonial pose. Richardson also noticed something else that made his pulse quicken. Thompson's hands, despite being covered by white ceremonial gloves, showed subtle signs of calluses and scars that were visible at the wrists. These weren't the soft hands of someone who only carried a ceremonial rifle. These were the hands of someone who had extensive experience with real weapons in real combat situations. That afternoon, Richardson's secure phone rang. Henderson's voice sounded tense when he answered. "Marcus, we need to talk. In person. Can you get to the safe house on Pemberton Street within an hour?" Richardson felt his stomach tighten. Henderson only used the safe house when dealing with highly classified information. "I'll be there." The safe house was a nondescript apartment building in a quiet London neighborhood. Richardson had used it several times during previous assignments, and he knew it was equipped with the latest counter-surveillance technology. Whatever Henderson had discovered about Thompson was serious enough to warrant maximum security protocols. Henderson was waiting for him in the third-floor apartment, looking older and more worn than Richardson remembered. The man's normally steady hands shook slightly as he poured coffee from a thermos. "Marcus, sit down. What I'm about to tell you is going to change everything you think you know about this assignment." Richardson took a seat in the sparse living room, his military training keeping him alert and focused despite his growing anxiety. Henderson opened a thick manila folder and spread several photographs across the coffee table. The images showed Guard Thompson in various settings, but he wasn't wearing a Royal Guard uniform in any of them. "Your Guard Thompson is actually Lieutenant Colonel Michael Thompson, United States Army Special Forces. He's been missing in action for 6 months. Richardson stared at the photographs, his mind struggling to process the information. Missing in action? What kind of operation was he involved in? Henderson's expression grew even more serious. That's where things get complicated. Thompson was part of a joint task force investigating international arms trafficking. His last known mission was infiltrating a network that was selling American military weapons to hostile foreign governments. Richardson studied the photos more carefully. In them, Thompson wore the uniform of an elite special forces unit, complete with numerous commendations and badges that indicated extensive combat experience. This was clearly not the young ceremonial guard Richardson had initially assumed him to be. 6 months ago, Thompson's team was conducting surveillance on a suspected arms dealer in Eastern Europe. The operation went bad, and 3 team members were killed. Thompson disappeared during the firefight, and his body was never recovered. He was officially declared missing in action, presumed dead. Richardson felt a chill run down his spine. And now he's standing guard at the Royal Embassy in London, using perfect cover as a ceremonial guard. Exactly. But here's what makes this even more concerning. There's no official record of Thompson being assigned to embassy duty. According to military personnel records, he's still listed as missing in action. Henderson pulled out another set of documents, these bearing official military seals and classification stamps. I reached out to some contacts in military intelligence. Thompson's case file is sealed at the highest levels. Whatever operation he was really involved in, it's so classified that even people with top-secret clearance can't access the details. Richardson leaned back in his chair, trying to understand the implications of what he was learning. So either Thompson is working undercover for American intelligence, Or he's gone rogue and is operating on his own agenda. There's a third possibility, Henderson said quietly. Thompson might have been captured and turned by hostile intelligence services. He could be a double agent, using his position at the embassy to gather intelligence on both American and British operations. The weight of that possibility settled over Richardson like a heavy blanket. If Thompson was indeed a compromised asset, his position at the Royal Embassy gave him access to sensitive information about both nations' security protocols. He could observe diplomatic movements, identify intelligence personnel, and potentially compromise ongoing operations. "What's our next move?" Richardson asked. Henderson gathered the photographs and documents back into the folder. "Officially, you're going to continue your normal diplomatic duties as if nothing has happened. Unofficially, you're going to maintain surveillance on Thompson and report any unusual behavior or contacts. And if I determine that he's a threat?" Henderson's expression became stone cold. "Then we extract him, and we find out exactly what he knows and who he's working for." Richardson left the safe house with his mind racing. He had thought he was dealing with a simple case of mistaken identity or protocol confusion. Instead, he had uncovered what could be a major intelligence operation or security breach. That evening, Richardson sat in his quarters reviewing everything he knew about Thompson. He studied the surveillance photos Henderson had provided, comparing them to his memories of the guard he had encountered. The physical characteristics matched perfectly, but the implications were staggering. Richardson realized that Thompson's perfect American military salute hadn't been a mistake or coincidence. It had been a message. Thompson had wanted Richardson to recognize his training, to question his presence at the embassy. But why? Was Thompson trying to make contact with American intelligence? Was he attempting to blow his own cover for some reason? Or was this all part of a larger operation that Richardson didn't understand? Richardson made a decision that would prove crucial in the days to come. Instead of simply observing Thompson from a distance, he was going to make direct contact. He needed to understand Thompson's motivations and determine whether he was friend or foe. The next morning, Richardson arrived at the Royal Embassy earlier than usual. He positioned himself where he could observe Thompson's entire shift, looking for any signs of unusual behavior or suspicious contacts. Thompson performed his duties with mechanical precision, but Richardson noticed subtle signs that suggested the guard was aware of being watched. Thompson's eyes moved in patterns that indicated counter-surveillance training, and he occasionally shifted his position in ways that gave him better sight lines to potential threats. Around midday, Richardson noticed something that made his blood run cold. A man in an expensive suit approached the embassy and struck up a casual conversation with another tourist near Thompson's position. The conversation appeared innocent enough, but Richardson's trained eye caught the subtle hand signals and body language that indicated a prearranged intelligence meeting. The man in the suit was making contact with Thompson. Richardson watched as the man dropped a small object near Thompson's feet while pretending to take photographs of the embassy architecture. Thompson didn't acknowledge the drop, but Richardson saw his eyes track the object's location. When the man left several minutes later, Thompson waited exactly 5 minutes before shifting his position slightly. His foot moved over the dropped object, and Richardson realized that Thompson had just received what was almost certainly a dead-drop communication. Richardson felt his heart pounding as the implications became clear. Thompson wasn't just a missing American soldier hiding in plain sight. He was actively engaged in intelligence operations while wearing the uniform of a royal guard. The question was, who was he working for? As Richardson watched Thompson continue his shift with perfect military bearing, he realized that the situation was far more complex and dangerous than he had initially imagined. Thompson's presence at the embassy wasn't just a security concern. It was potentially an act of war disguised as ceremonial duty. Richardson knew that his next move could determine the outcome of what was shaping up to be a major international incident. He had to find out the truth about Thompson's mission, and he had to do it before whatever operation was in motion reached its conclusion. The stakes had just gotten much higher, and Richardson was running out of time to uncover the truth. Richardson spent a sleepless night planning his approach. He couldn't simply confront Thompson directly. If the guard was working for hostile intelligence, a direct confrontation could compromise ongoing operations or put innocent lives at risk. But he also couldn't wait much longer to act. The dead drop he had witnessed suggested that Thompson was actively engaged in some kind of operation. The next morning, Richardson arrived at the embassy with a carefully prepared plan. He would create an opportunity for private contact with Thompson, using his diplomatic credentials to request a security briefing. It was a plausible cover story that would allow him to assess Thompson's loyalties without immediately revealing what he knew. Richardson approached the embassy entrance just as the morning guard shift was beginning. Thompson was in his usual position, standing with perfect military bearing as the early morning crowd of diplomats and staff began arriving for work. "Guard Thompson," Richardson said in a voice loud enough for others to hear, "I need to speak with you about embassy security protocols." Thompson's eyes flickered with surprise for just a moment before returning to their practiced neutrality. "Yes, sir. I can arrange for you to speak with the head of security. Actually, I need to speak with you specifically. You've been recommended as someone with particular expertise in perimeter security." Richardson watched Thompson's face carefully as he spoke. He was looking for any sign that Thompson understood the real meaning behind his words, any indication that the guard was prepared for this kind of contact. Thompson nodded slowly. "I can meet with you during my break, sir. There's a briefing room on the second floor that we can use." "Excellent. In 1 hour?" "Yes, sir." Richardson spent the next hour reviewing his strategy and preparing for what could be the most important conversation of his career. He had decided to be partially honest with Thompson, revealing some of what he knew while holding back crucial details. It was a delicate balance that could either establish trust or trigger a dangerous confrontation. The briefing room was small and windowless, designed for confidential conversations. Thompson arrived precisely on time, having changed from his ceremonial uniform into standard military fatigues. Without the ornate red tunic and tall black hat, Thompson looked exactly like what he really was, a highly trained Special Forces soldier. "Close the door, Lieutenant Colonel Thompson," Richardson said quietly. Thompson's hand froze on the door handle. For several seconds, neither man moved or spoke. Then Thompson slowly closed the door and turned to face Richardson with a completely different expression. The ceremonial mask was gone, replaced by the alert, calculating look of a professional soldier. "How long have you known?" Thompson asked. "Since the moment you returned my salute 2 days ago. No Royal Guard learns to salute like that." Thompson nodded and took a seat across from Richardson. "I was wondering if anyone would catch that. Most people see the uniform and assume they know everything about the person wearing it." Richardson studied Thompson's face, looking for any sign of deception or hostility. What he saw instead was exhaustion and something that looked like relief. "Jack Henderson ran your background. According to official records, you've been missing in action for 6 months. Your team was killed in Eastern Europe during an arms trafficking investigation." Thompson's expression darkened. "Henderson always was thorough. What else did he tell you?" "That your case file is classified at the highest levels, and that there's no official record of you being assigned to embassy duty." Richardson leaned forward. "I need to know what you're really doing here, Michael." Thompson was quiet for a long moment, seemingly weighing his options. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of months of isolation and stress. "The operation in Eastern Europe wasn't what we were told it was. We thought we were investigating arms trafficking, but we were actually bait in a much larger trap." Richardson felt his stomach tighten. "What kind of trap?" Someone in American intelligence was feeding information to hostile foreign governments. Our mission was designed to flush out the double agent by making them reveal themselves to save us. But the operation went wrong. Thompson nodded grimly. The double agent didn't take the bait. Instead, our entire team was marked for elimination. My teammates died because someone wanted to cover their tracks. Richardson processed this information, understanding the implications immediately. You survived and went underground. I had no choice. I couldn't trust anyone in official channels because I didn't know who the double agent was. I needed to disappear completely while I figured out how to expose them. And you chose to hide as a royal guard? Thompson almost smiled at that. It was actually brilliant cover. Royal guards are invisible to most people. They're seen as living decorations rather than real soldiers. I could observe embassy operations, gather intelligence on personnel, and identify patterns that might reveal the double agent. Richardson leaned back in his chair, beginning to understand the scope of what Thompson had been attempting. How long have you been here? 4 months. It took me 2 months to establish the identity and get placed in this position. The Royal Guard application process is thorough, but not impossible to infiltrate if you know what you're doing. And what have you discovered? Thompson's expression became deadly serious. The double agent is here, in London. They're using their position to coordinate with foreign intelligence services and compromise ongoing operations throughout Europe. Richardson felt a chill run down his spine. Do you know who it is? I have it narrowed down to 3 possibilities, all of them with access to the highest levels of classified information. But I need more time to gather definitive proof. What about the dead drop yesterday? I saw you receive something from a man in a suit. Thompson reached into his pocket and pulled out a small electronic device. Encrypted communication from an ally in military intelligence who's been helping me from the outside. He's identified suspicious financial transactions that might be connected to the double agent. Richardson examined the device, recognizing it as a highly sophisticated piece of intelligence equipment. Who is your contact? Someone I trust completely, someone who's been trying to expose this corruption for months. He can't act officially because the double agent's position gives them the power to discredit or eliminate anyone who gets too close to the truth. Richardson made a crucial decision. Michael, I want to help you complete this mission. Thompson looked surprised. You don't understand the risks involved. If the double agent discovers that I'm alive and investigating them, they'll move to eliminate both of us. I understand the risks perfectly, but I also understand that letting a double agent continue to operate at this level poses an even greater risk to national security. Thompson studied Richardson's face for several seconds, then nodded slowly. All right, but we do this my way, using the protocols I've established. The slightest deviation could compromise everything I've worked for. Agreed. What's our next step? Thompson pulled out a detailed map of the embassy complex and spread it across the table. Tomorrow night, there's a classified briefing scheduled for senior diplomatic staff. All 3 of my suspects will be present, and one of them is likely to make contact with their foreign handler either before or after the meeting. How do we identify which one? I've planted surveillance devices throughout the embassy over the past 4 months. Tomorrow night, we'll monitor all communications and movements to catch the double agent in the act. Richardson looked at the map, noting the strategic positions Thompson had marked. This is incredibly sophisticated planning. You've been preparing for this moment for months. I've had to be patient. There's only going to be one opportunity to expose the double agent with enough evidence to ensure prosecution. If we fail, they'll disappear and continue their operations from somewhere else. The 2 men spent the next hour reviewing Thompson's intelligence files and surveillance data. Richardson was impressed by the thoroughness of Thompson's investigation and the quality of evidence he had gathered. It was clear that Thompson had used his time in hiding wisely, building an airtight case against whoever the double agent turned out to be. As their meeting concluded, Thompson returned to his ceremonial uniform and prepared to resume his duties as a royal guard. But before leaving, he turned back to Richardson with a serious expression. "Marcus, I need you to understand something. If this operation goes wrong tomorrow night, if we're discovered or the double agent escapes, it won't just be our careers that are finished. The intelligence this person has access to could compromise ongoing operations throughout NATO and put hundreds of lives at risk." Richardson nodded solemnly. "I understand the stakes, Michael. We'll get this right." That evening, Richardson contacted Henderson using secure protocols and briefed him on the situation. Henderson's response was immediate and unequivocal. Richardson had full support for the operation, including backup resources if needed. The next day passed slowly as Richardson went through the motions of his regular diplomatic duties while mentally preparing for the evening's operation. He reviewed Thompson's surveillance data, studied the embassy layout, and prepared contingency plans for various scenarios. As evening approached, Richardson positioned himself in the embassy's main reception area where he could observe the arrivals for the classified briefing. One by one, senior diplomatic personnel began arriving, including the 3 suspects Thompson had identified. Richardson watched each suspect carefully, looking for any signs of unusual behavior or anxiety that might indicate they were preparing to make contact with a foreign handler. All 3 appeared calm and professional, giving no obvious indication of guilt. At exactly 8 o'clock, the briefing began in a secure conference room on the 3rd floor. Richardson and Thompson had positioned themselves to monitor all exits from the building, as well as several key communication points where a double agent might attempt to pass information. For the first hour, nothing unusual happened. The suspects remained in the briefing room, and there were no unauthorized communications detected by Thompson's surveillance equipment. Then, at 9:15 p.m., everything changed. One of the suspects, Deputy Military Attaché Sarah Chen, excused herself from the briefing and headed toward the embassy's rear exit. Thompson's surveillance equipment immediately detected encrypted communication signals originating from her location. Richardson and Thompson moved quickly but carefully to intercept Chen without alerting her to their presence. They found her in a small courtyard behind the embassy, speaking in hushed tones on what appeared to be a highly encrypted communication device. As they watched from concealment, Chen transmitted detailed information about American military operations in Eastern Europe, including classified troop movements and intelligence assessments. The evidence was overwhelming. They had found their double agent. Thompson activated a recording device to capture Chen's transmission, ensuring they would have definitive proof of her betrayal. But as he did so, Chen suddenly stopped talking and turned toward their hiding spot. "I know you're there," she said calmly. "You might as well come out." Richardson and Thompson emerged from concealment, knowing that their cover was blown, but hoping they had captured enough evidence to ensure prosecution. Chen smiled coldly as she saw Thompson's face. "Lieutenant Colonel Michael Thompson, I was told you were dead. Sorry to disappoint you, Sarah, but I've been very much alive and gathering evidence of your activities for the past 4 months. Chen's expression didn't change, but Richardson could see calculation behind her eyes as she assessed her situation. "Evidence of what activities? I'm simply conducting authorized communications with Allied intelligence services." "Authorized by whom?" Richardson asked. "Because I have recordings of you transmitting classified American military intelligence to foreign handlers." Chen's calm facade finally cracked. "You don't understand what you're interfering with. This operation is bigger than any of us." "Then explain it to us," Thompson said, stepping closer. "Help us understand why you betrayed your oath and got my teammates killed." For a moment, Chen looked as if she might confess everything. But then her expression hardened again, and Richardson realized she was reaching for something in her jacket. "Sarah, don't make this any worse than it already is," Richardson warned. But Chen had already made her choice. Instead of surrendering, she activated what appeared to be an emergency beacon, undoubtedly signaling her foreign contacts that the operation had been compromised. Thompson moved quickly to disarm Chen and secure the communication device, but Richardson knew the damage was done. Chen's handlers now knew that their operation had been exposed, and they would disappear before any arrests could be made. However, as Richardson watched Thompson efficiently restrain Chen and secure the evidence they had gathered, he realized that they had achieved something even more valuable than capturing a single double agent. They had exposed the entire network, gathered evidence of foreign intelligence operations on British soil, and proven that American and British intelligence agencies could work together to counter threats to both nations. Most importantly, they had vindicated Thompson's months of dangerous undercover work and restored his honor as a soldier who had never abandoned his duty, even when abandoned by his own command. As British security forces arrived to take Chen into custody, Richardson looked at Thompson with new respect. The young man he had initially mistaken for a ceremonial guard had turned out to be one of the most dedicated and resourceful soldiers he had ever encountered. "So what happens now, Michael?" Richardson asked, as they watched Chen being led away in handcuffs. Thompson straightened his Royal Guard uniform one final time and looked back toward the embassy entrance where his post awaited. "Now I finish my shift, Colonel. A Royal Guard never abandons his post." Richardson smiled and gave Thompson one final salute, a perfect American military salute between two soldiers who had served their country with honor, courage, and an unwavering commitment to the truth.